This is day 5 of the March 91 7-day retreat at Springwater. Having a focus for attention, like eating an apple, or during sitting focusing on the breathing, seems to be an aid in being aware of a great many things that otherwise go unnoticed. It is also something to come back to when the mind has wandered into trains of thought. Going into the kitchen to drink orange juice, wanting to eat some more food, going to bed to sleep, and the enjoyment of that is all of that selfishness. Isn't there anything that may be conducive to being more attentive, more aware? What is so important about the question whether there is a thinker separate from thought? Is this just an intellectual question? Is there awareness of being aware? What do you mean by being aware? Maybe it wasn't made clear yesterday in discussing the question whether there is a thinker separate from the thoughts. That a deep understanding of this division, a deep insight into the division, which is the resolution of it, the ending of the division between thinker and thought, is sort of the core of this work. Maybe the most intellectual way of looking at it, or intellect-provoking way of looking at it, is looking whether there is indeed a thinker of the thought, or whether that itself is a thought, that there's a thinker. Already listening just to the sounds of the words may boggle the mind and says, oh, leave me alone with this intellectual stuff. But I just want to assure people that it was not an intellectual consideration. One can look at those things. How does this idea or the feeling that there's a thinker come about? I don't want to get into this again, because we feel that division in other ways. For some people who are very much into thinking and figuring out thinking via thinking, this is the way to look at it. Is there a separate thinker? But in right now, listening to this howling wind, is there a separate listener? in looking inwardly or looking at the floor, the mat, the knees, is there a separate looker? Separate from what he, she sees? Is the listener separate from what is heard? Is the experience of cold of a draft or the warmth of sun, is that separate from the experiencer who experiences that? This is how we live and feel and think, isn't it? We're nurtured in that separation. Maybe we already bring some of that into life at birth, maybe before birth. There's already some program there of the separation, or if not, it is very quickly picked up from everyone around us who is nurtured in this division. A subject different from all the objects around. And this division into subject and object, experiencer and what is experienced, observer and what is observed, listener and what is listened to. This division strongly affects our perceptions. Because all that goes into this feeling of separation, our whole background of conditioning, training, believing, superstition, fearing and wanting, affects and distorts our perceptions. Because the separate experiencer, listener, or thinker is all of that past experience. Our training, our being imprinted with beliefs and ideas, ideals, ideologies, religious outlooks. All of that is listening, is looking, is observing. And therefore there is no freedom to listen and observe, because the background listens and observes, and therefore distorts the input by its being there and already thinking in terms of what it is, what I remember this to have been. In walking around, this tremendous wind and the sound of it, there's tree sounds and wood sounds, house sounds. I wondered why there was sort of a dis-ease, feeling of dis-ease that I was experiencing. And what came up is that loud sounds, deeply associated in this background with danger and destruction, of bombing raids, something loud, you better watch out before you even look and find out what it is. Of course, a huge tree limb can also knock you down. So, maybe not just conditioned by having gone through some air raids. Remember, our little son, one time I was on the phone, he was playing in the garage. The garage door was open, and the door to the backyard was not very tight, and the wind was tremendous. So suddenly a gust of wind opened up the door to the backyard, and there was a sweeping draft through that garage, and I heard him crying, screaming. So I rushed down, and here he was holding on to papers, rugs, rags, whatever he could get a hold of to not let it blow away. And crying. The whole world was blowing away. but sweep him up in one's arms and hold on to him. So there was a feeling of danger with this wind, obviously. And then I wondered in walking whether it was also possible to listen without that background. Just listen. Listen intently. Not intentionally, but wondering about it. And listening, wondering, quietly. And it is possible to just hear what's there without the background. And then it's different. It isn't all wrought with knowledge, expectation, past experience. So is it possible in the blinking of an eye, as some old teachers have said, to realize that subject and object are one? That sounds very intellectual, doesn't it? That's why we usually don't speak that way. But to realize that there's just what is, and no one who is experiencing or enduring it, suffering from it, or needing to hold on to it, or to be afraid of it. Everything just being what it is, including this organism with all its potential for reacting, all its imprinted wirings, which want to spring into action. And if they do spring into action, then there's me separate from what I see and hear and feel, needing to, whatever, get myself somehow or other into relationship with it. Because this is what usually happens. And see, you cannot see the observer, you cannot see the thinker, or see the experiencer. These are all just ways of reacting, ways of manifesting physically and mentally. And from that is deduced that there is an entity. So to say, well, I got to see that observer, I've got to find that witness. You don't find anything. All you find is thoughts and feelings, emotions, sensations, images, remembrances, anticipations of the future, creation of time, in which something will happen to me and mine, to me and the people I'm concerned with, my friends, fellow, whatever, group members. So one has to watch these manifestations, not expect to find an observer. Although if you expect to find an observer, or like one person sort of facetiously said, this little man behind the eyes, then let's look for him. Always impressed me so much when we were read at the Zen Center a story by Zen teacher Basui, who was, as a 7-year-old child, present at his father's funeral. There were these cakes, and he asked the priest, for whom are those cakes? And he said, they're for your father. He said, well, he's dead. He said, well, they're for the soul of your father. And it occurred to him that if his father had a soul, he must have one too. And if he had one, he could find it, if it was there. Well, he didn't maybe doubt at the time that it was there. He went to find that soul. But he never found it. What he found was something totally unexpected, namely nothing. But not this idea of nothing. And with that, a lifetime of talking, discussing, meeting with people, prodding, urging, according to his conditioning. To find for yourself, if there's a notion that there is a separate me, which we all have, let's find it, or get a hold of it if it's there. And we begin with thinking about it. Of course, that's how we're conditioned. We see a problem or something to be investigated, well, let's think about it. So let's think as far as we can about it. One person said, I'm beginning to do this, but I can't quite get my teeth into it. Think of my name, and is that me? This body, is that me? All my thoughts, thinking about my relatives or friends, is that still me? Well, find out if your friends are, if you're very close with your friends, identified with them, and somebody insults them, will you defend them as though it was you, or get hurt? If your religion or your political party, your profession, that you are anything you're identified with, identified meaning, this is me, that's part of me. Any one of those identified people or institutions are being attacked. Are you going to fight as though it was your own body and family? We do. We've just been through it again, and it's still going on. Fighting for our country, giving our life for our country. This large, enormous me. We don't see it that way. We put it in idealistic terms. I often wondered if I lost an arm or a leg or both, would it still be me? Would I still think me? Because right now I think of me as having all that. Yes, this is me now. I think in those terms. Somebody flatters me, tells me something nice about myself. Good we say, I felt good about it. It made me feel good about myself. And the other side, somebody insulting. We talked at great length yesterday in one group meeting about the fear of being hurt again, having just been hurt and having to go back to this person to make a request. And tremendous trepidation and fear and anxiety to have to face that person again and make a request, having been humiliated or ignored. The whole body in disorder, disarray, and upset at the anticipated meeting, about the anticipated meeting with this person. The fear, not just of getting hurt, but of getting angry. Out of hurt, out of fear. We get angry out of hurt and out of fear. Try to ward it off or fight it back. And the question kept coming up, why are we afraid of hurt? And what is it that is getting hurt? What is it that is getting humiliated or ignored? And that is afraid of that and wants to preserve that, wants that not to happen. It's such a vital question we're asking. One person telling me how in this particular retreat it's become so clear the all-pervasive role that the self-image plays. And when it is threatened, also in anticipation of an event, how everything is turned topsy-turvy in the body-mind. Person said, I used to hear before coming here, he heard your tapes, and I thought, can she talk of something else but images? But now realizing the depth of it, the seeming solidity of it, and what it does, how it can just play havoc with this whole organism and our relationship then Because when this organism is in upset and disarray, how can we relate to each other and to the clouds or stream? We don't even see that. And as people say, to just say this is an image doesn't help. No, it doesn't help. It's just verbiage. As we see, it's just a card house, a scaffold of insubstantial stuff, which, because the body reacts so palpably, so concretely and noticeably, seems to give that card house reality. And yet it can collapse in seeing what it is. That all the reality this me has is the reality of remembrances and ideas and thoughts with their related feelings. And that in listening there is no listener, there's only what's listened to. Let's not even put it this way. There's only this caw. This is what we call awareness, just caw. Sound of someone breathing or moving, or the wind. Still calling it by words, but words need not be there. If they're there, they don't need to confuse or to divide. And this is what we call awareness, where the self-center is not in forceful operation, directing everything, bringing itself in relationship to the wind, to the crows, to the people. Let's talk some more about this, because to observe that, to feel it, to hear, come upon it, how when we see something, normally in our normal semi-aware, semi-attentive state, I won't say completely inattentive, which we are also at times, then it's immediately bringing oneself in relationship with what is being seen. What does this mean to me? One person in a meeting said, I've noticed I see people as objects around me. It's an interesting description. Does it mean, what can you do for me? What can you mean to me? How nice it would be to have you as a companion. Or, I don't want to be near you. Not this object I want near me. And please, can it be conveyed that this is not said judgmentally? Because if we begin to judge this as being bad, morally wrong, then the looking becomes dim. Or as one person says, when you start talking about certain things, the self, I just zonk out. I don't hear it. But he noticed that this is happening. Is it one is so afraid of being judged wrong, having done a lifetime of mistakes and not being able to bear the thought of that, and therefore zonking out when this is talked about? We're not talking about it judgmentally. We're talking about it to shed light, to reveal what moves human beings and has moved human beings since time immemorial, in conflict and clash and isolation, loneliness, despair and suffering, sorrow, you name it. I'm not saying that there's not also pleasure here and there. Sometimes people say, why don't you talk about that? I don't think it needs talking about much. Although, maybe it does. Because pleasure, the way we use the word, pleasure through thought, is the same as fear through thought, or anger through thought. thought can recreate the same pleasurable experiences that the actual experience did. It's the amazing power of thought to trigger reactions that are appropriate for real events, but can also be responses to imagined events. Am I talking too fast? That's the good thing when we have a meeting, then a person says, wait a minute, go slow. Actually discussed here whether it would be all right. We discussed it once out of retreat, whether it be all right for people who are listening to say, could you go slower or say that again? But the sort of more people felt that this would be disturbing. Rather let go of something and stay with the flow. But you can ask in group or private meetings. We were discussing what is attention, and that attention, or let's say awareness, I often use the words synonymously. The awareness, the way the word is used here right now, means no self-center with the urge to bring itself in relationship with what's there. Or if it does arise, to see that, and to see the distortion or the narrowing that takes place when that happens. And we said this is where we were. I'm not saying that judgmentally. And because it is often heard judgmentally, then such thoughts and paining thoughts arise. If I want some orange juice in the kitchen, or want to eat some more food, or really yearn to go to bed and feel good and sleeping, is that selfishness? Why put a label on it? On going and drinking some juice and the fragrance, the flavor of it, the good feeling it causes, eating an apple, the sounds of it, crunching, the salivation, the swallowing, marvelous taste and texture, the sweetness, sourness, juice, you name it. All of that, to be with that, to be that. And when one is tired, exhausted, there's nothing more welcome and relaxing, relieving, and to be in bed, warm, stretched out, soft, done with the day's work. And then the thought comes up, am I being selfish? And then all hell can break loose. Even now I'm selfish. And the sleep is gone, or the comfort. Now comes ancient guilt feelings about being self-centered. At that moment, if we are to label things, then self rears up, namely thinking about myself as being selfish. As long as the eating of the apple or drinking of juice and really tasting and feeling it all was taking place, there's no thought needed, and often no thought occurs. And then no feeling of being a separate enjoyer or doer. It's just all one process. And it has no problems. It does not impact other people. Unless one takes the last apple and there's someone behind us. Well, then we can share it. Cut it in half. Can't cut it into 50 pieces. That may be going too far. alone can do all kinds of things. But there may be the idea again, oh, what a marvelous sharer I am. I don't want to leave. Don't want to leave anybody out. I'm so altruistic. I'm only thinking of others. And actually, the self-image is being fed at the same time. Maybe not so much with apple. So it permeates this whole series of talks. Can one look at things and not be caught up in judgment and putting oneself down or up? That's when the problem starts. Because then we live in this addictive fantasy about myself. And there's no end to needing to do more for that image. Or putting it down. It's both of it is addictive, meaning a compulsion which is demanded in the whole body makeup. The image also affects the body, of course. Compulsion to continue with that. Also, that is not said judgmental. Can we see it? Can it be seen? Can there be insight into it? Not condemnation. The condemnation has nothing to do with insight. That's why all our punitive measures that society takes against people who do things socially unacceptable, all that punitive action does not bring insight on the part of the one who did it. Either brings confirmation of that one is bad after all, and that's all one is born to do, or that society is bad. But where is the separation, anyways, between me and society? What is society made up of? But a million me's. So to come to the question whether in awareness there is awareness of being aware. It's a good one to examine, because in that the very subtle movement of thought may be detected. Because I think we were discussing it, if I remember right, in a group, and there seemed to be quite an agreement that there can be awareness of being aware. But awareness is awareness. That's what it is. It's not awareness of itself. That's thought. Awareness is what is. That's all. That's sufficient. And that when there's no one to need to bring herself, himself into relationship with a state and reflect upon it, give an accounting of it, then there's no need, there's no reflection upon awareness. That is the operation of thought. Saying, hey, I'm aware. How marvelous. Before I felt in darkness, now I feel aware, not condemning those thoughts, but it is those thoughts that bring about the feeling that I'm aware of being aware. One can look at that when it happens, and if one is not for or against or in this judging mood, then it clarifies that thinking is one thing and awareness is another. Awareness can shed light on thinking, but thinking cannot shed light on awareness. It can only think about it, and that's not the whole thing. No matter how clear the thinking is, As long as it's thinking, it's thinking. Which is a different process. A different mode of the mind. Trying to represent in language, in symbols, in pictures, what is perceived. And then, as quickly as conditioning flows, to judge it. Say it's right or wrong, good or bad. Or the associations that happen through what is already wired in this mind-body. This reminds me of that, which was good or bad. So, the question, is there a feeling of being separate from what is? Can be a very powerful, deepening question of investigating what this separation is, or what this separate observer is made up of. We can't will this state of no separation. Will does not bring it about, because will, intention, wanting it, having the goal of achieving it, strengthens the separate doer. Do you see that? Will has to be maintained, the goal has to be kept in mind, and that strengthens the separate me that's going to attain the state of no separation. This is the question I was looking for, which we started out with, which came up in a meeting, in a group. Feeling that in eating an apple, all of a sudden so much attention, so much awareness of all the intricacies of eating, and something to come back to when the mind is lost in trains of thought, or counting or following the breathing. The helpfulness of that, to have a focus. So the mind, which means thought, isn't all over the place. It's up to each one what to do while sitting or eating apples. We're not prescribing anything and not condemning anything. We're just looking at things when they come up, when they're brought up, alone and together. And this question was asked. In having this focus of following the breathing or the apple eating focus, is there also somewhere, subtly or not so subtly, the image of me having this focus and benefiting greatly from being more attentive? And maybe becoming attached and addicted to this practice because it brings me attention, energy, a good feeling about myself as a meditator, as opposed to this bad feeling, being a distracted, frazzled person. And as long as that image or separate entity is reinforced, maintained through the practice, the division continues. It's not that Toni just has this thing of being down on practice. This is her thing, sometimes people have told me. It's in experiencing the breathing, it doesn't need to be a focus. The wind is there too, and this whatever is rattling up there, and people moving, and the pain in the foot. As long as we have a focus and cling to the focus, we think we need a focus. It's a self-enforcing, self-reinforcing thing. And I'm not saying it's bad. One can really train concentration, like one can train running and playing piano and adding up. So also concentration can be trained to become sharper and sharper, but has nothing to do with insight into this whole process of concentration and wanting it and being identified with it as one succeeds more and more in it. I often wonder how athletes, whether do they get in their training also training in concentration? Because they're tremendously concentrated. The image comes to mind of someone, a 10-meter board, taking a backward dive, just holding on to that board with the toes, and the arms straightening, the body straightening, and there's no looking left or right, and you have the feeling there's no thought in there except this act. No matter by what training this concentration came about. I don't know whether athletes have meditation training too. Maybe some modern ones do. But it is very necessary for performing what they're performing. But maybe if you want to get down that slope or off this board and do so well and be so in control and such beautiful shape, wanting that brings about the concentration. I remember when I took in college a science course, which was very difficult for me at the time. But I wanted to succeed in that course, because I'd never been good at it. And this was a new opportunity, was Science 101. It wasn't presupposing anything. I came from Germany, and I found that very nice, that nobody was supposed to know anything. Same with a math course 101. I had always hated math. I thought I was no good at it. I would blank out when my father would ask me a simple math question, just to try to do something for me, and I couldn't because I didn't want to disappoint him. And here is Math and Science 101, starting literally from 1 + 1 is 2. A very gentle, beautiful way of starting over and finding out that your ideas about that you're no good at something are just ideas. Anybody can learn a little science, a little math. And wanting to do that, partly because of my background, wanting to succeed in it, I developed tremendous concentration. And the teacher thought I was a science genius. No one had that motivation as I did, probably, to succeed in this thing. It was nothing great. Very simple stuff. But what we're coming to is that if you want to find out something very badly or want to do something very passionately, then all of a sudden concentration is there. And you don't skip left and right, because there's what you want to do. And that's probably what works here too, if you really need to find out about yourself. Watch what's going on when the body feels totally upset with fear or anger. Be with it. Let it reveal itself. Then all of a sudden the mind is concentrated because it wants to find out something. So the question, do we have to practice concentration first before we can do proper meditation? I don't answer those questions, or else I say, no, I don't feel that way. And yet, it's up to each one to find out. Don't follow what I say, and therefore don't do what you feel you need to do. But being here, we'll question it together. And that may shed some light for all of us in what we're doing. Not taking anything for granted. We will end here for today.